The champagne tasted like ash in Serafina's mouth as her father auctioned her to the highest bidder. She stood at the edge
This
of the
changes
Hamilton Mansion
everything.
ballroom,
Indeed, we
her
must act with
fingers
haste.
But
white-knuckled
the
around the
implications
ivory
are
fan her
severe.
mother had shoved into her hands an hour earlier. The crystal chandeliers above threw fractured light across 300 faces, all of them wearing the same expression, hungry anticipation. They had come to watch Earl Thornfield's final humiliation, and by God, he was giving them a show. Her father swayed at the center of the marble floor, his cravat askew, his wig powdered unevenly. In his trembling hand, he clutched a sheaf of papers that rustled like dead leaves every time he gestured. Marriage contracts. 3 of them. He had drawn them up himself, drunk in his study, while the creditors hammered at the door. "Gentlemen," the Earl slurred his voice, carrying across the shocked silence. "My daughter is 21 years of age, unspoiled, educated in Latin, French, Italian, and Spanish. She reads, she writes, she plays the pianoforte tolerably well." He paused, swaying dangerously. "She is also desperate, as am I, so let us dispense with the niceties of courtship and proceed directly to negotiation." The crowd erupted in scandalized whispers. Somewhere near the orchestra platform, a woman fainted. The musicians had stopped playing halfway through a minuet, their bows frozen above their instruments. Serafina's mother, Lady Margaret Thornfield, stood 3 feet away, her face a rigid mask of powder and rouge. She leaned close enough that Serafina could smell the rosewater perfume doing battle with the sharp tang of fierce sweat. "Smile," her mother hissed. "For God's sake, smile." Serafina could not smile. Her jaw felt welded shut. She watched her father unfold the first contract with fingers that shook so badly the parchment tore. "Lord Pemberton offers £8,000, the Earl announced, "payable upon consummation of the marriage. He is 63 years of age and requires an heir, as his first 3 wives all died in childbed." He looked up, squinting across the ballroom. "Lord Pemberton, are you still interested?" A wizened man near the refreshment table raised one liver-spotted hand. The crowd laughed. It was not a kind sound. Serafina tasted blood. She had bitten the inside of her cheek without realizing it. The copper tang mixed with the champagne, and for a moment she thought she might be sick right there on the polished floor. Her father moved to the second contract. "Mr. Cornelius Thatcher offers £12,000. He read, his voice gaining an edge of manic enthusiasm. "He owns a tobacco plantation in Virginia and assures me his previous wife's death by consumption was entirely natural and not at all suspicious." The Earl laughed at his own joke. No one else did. The third contract remained in his hand, and Serafina knew what it contained before he spoke. She had seen Victor Harrington watching her all evening from his position near the grand staircase. He stood like a Roman statue in his wine-colored coat, his dark hair perfectly pomaded, his smile sharp as a blade. Victor Harrington was 28 years old and owned half the merchant ships in New York Harbor. He was beautiful in the way that predators are beautiful, sleek, powerful, utterly without mercy. Serafina had turned down his proposal 6 months ago. He had not forgotten. "Mr. Victor Harrington," her father announced, his voice dropping to something almost reverent, "offers £20,000, payable immediately upon signing. No conditions, no requirements. Simply," he paused, swaying, "simply my daughter's hand in marriage." The ballroom went silent. Victor stepped forward through the crowd, which parted before him like water before a ship's bow. He moved with the confidence of a man who had never been denied anything. His boots clicked rhythmically on the marble. When he reached the center of the floor, he did not look at Earl Thornfield. He looked directly at Serafina. "I accept," he said. His voice was smooth as silk and cold as January ice. "I'll take her." The crowd erupted, not in shock this time, but in approval. Victor Harrington was one of them, wealthy and powerful and untouchable. Of course he should have the bankrupt Earl's daughter. It was the natural order of things. Victor crossed the ballroom towards Serafina with the slow, deliberate pace of a hunter who knows his prey cannot escape. The crowd pressed closer, forming a circle, trapping her. Her mother's hand clamped onto her elbow like a vice. "Smile," her mother whispered again, and this time there was pleading in her voice. "Smile or we lose everything." Victor stopped 3 feet away. Up close, she could see the calculation in his dark eyes, the way he assessed her like a man might assess a horse at auction. Checking the teeth, checking the bloodlines, checking for defects. "Lady Serafina," he said, and executed a bow so precisely correct it was insulting. "Your father has agreed. We marry before month's end." It was not a proposal. It was a proclamation of ownership. Serafina found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "Surely, Mr. Harrington, such a conversation should happen in private. Why? Victor's smile widened, showing perfect white teeth. Everyone knows your situation, Lady Serafina. I am doing your family a charity. He reached out and took her hand without asking permission. His grip was firm enough to hurt. You should be grateful. The humiliation burned through her chest like a coal. The crowd pressed closer, 300 witnesses to her degradation. She could hear them whispering, dissecting her failure, her father's failure, her family's collapse. This was entertainment for them. A cautionary tale they would tell at dinner parties for years to come. Victor lifted her hand to his lips. The kiss was dry, possessive. When he released her, there were red marks where his fingers had gripped. Midnight Serafina, he said loud enough for the nearest spectators to hear. The library. Bring your signature, or I tell the creditors where your father is hiding his last assets. He leaned close, his breath hot against her ear, and smiled, darling. You're getting exactly what girls like you deserve. He turned and walked away, his boots clicking a victory march across the marble. Serafina stood frozen in the center of the ballroom, her hand still raised where he had kissed it, feeling the eyes of 300 people burning into her skin. Her mother's fingers dug into her elbow. Her father had collapsed into a chair, already reaching for another glass of champagne. The musicians started playing again, some bright, cheerful waltz that made her want to scream. That was when the glass shattered. The sound cut through the music like a gunshot. Every head turned toward the refreshment table, where a waiter in a stained white coat stood, frozen champagne soaking the front of his uniform. At his feet, a silver tray lay overturned, surrounded by the glittering fragments of 24 crystal flutes. The man who had collided with the waiter stood utterly still, his arms held out at awkward angles, champagne dripping from his sleeves. He was young, perhaps 25, with sandy hair that fell across his forehead in unruly waves. His spectacles sat crooked on his nose. His coat was velvet but worn at the elbows. His breeches were clean but patched. Serafina recognized him. Everyone did. Lord Marcus Ashford, second son of the late Duke of Ashford. The trembling Duke. Mad Marcus. The stuttering fool who haunted the edges of society like a ghost, tolerated only because his family name still carried weight, even if he himself carried nothing. The ballroom's silence lasted perhaps 3 heartbeats. Then someone laughed. The laughter spread like fire through dry grass. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was roaring with it. Men slapped their thighs. Women hid their faces behind fans, their shoulders shaking. Even the musicians grinned. Marcus Ashford stood in the center of the wreckage, his face pale as milk, his hands trembling so violently that his fingers blurred. He opened his mouth, and what came out was barely recognizable as language. I, I, I am so sorry, he stammered the words, catching in his throat like fish on hooks. I didn't mean, I didn't see. Look at him. Victor Harrington's voice cut across the laughter like a whip. He had returned to the ballroom's center, drawn by the spectacle. Ashford the Puddle can't even walk without causing disaster. The crowd roared its approval. Someone near the back shouted, "Speech! Give us a speech, Your Grace!" Marcus dropped to his knees amid the broken glass. His hands moved frantically, trying to gather the shards, trying to clean up the mess. One piece cut his palm. Blood welled up bright red against his pale skin and dripped onto the white marble. Please, he whispered, though no one was listening. Please, I'll clean it up. Please don't. Victor stalked toward him, his boots crunching on broken crystal. The crowd fell silent again, sensing fresh sport. Leave it, you fool, Victor said, his voice dripping with contempt. He looked down at Marcus the way a man might look at something stuck to his shoe. You'll only make it worse. Go home, Ashford, if you can remember the way. Marcus flinched as if he had been struck. His bloodied hand curled against his chest. Behind his crooked spectacles, his eyes squeezed shut. The laughter this time was vicious, pack-animal cruelty. Serafina watched it wash over Marcus in waves, each new peal making him shrink, smaller curl, tighter. She watched his shoulders hunch. She watched him try to make himself invisible. She looked at Victor Harrington, standing over the kneeling man with a bully's glee, twisting his handsome face. She looked at her mother's hand on her elbow, the fingers white with desperate pressure. She looked at the crowd, 300 well-fed, well-dressed people who found infinite amusement in watching others suffer. Something inside Serafina Thornfield snapped. It was not a loud sound. It was the quiet crack of ice breaking on a frozen lake. The moment when you realize you are already falling and there is no safety left to reach for. She did not want safety. She did not want Victor's money or his ships or his perfectly pomaded hair. She did not want to smile while he paraded her like a prize mare. She did not want to spend the rest of her life as property. What she wanted, she realized with sudden crystal clarity, was to choose. Just once. To make one decision that was entirely her own. Her mother was whispering frantically in her ear. Serafina, where are you going? Stop. Stop right now. Serafina pulled her elbow free. She took one step forward, then another. Her heels clicked on the marble in the sudden quiet. The crowd parted before her, confused, uncertain. She could feel their stares like physical weight. She walked across the ballroom floor to where Marcus Ashford knelt in spilled champagne and broken glass. She stopped directly in front of him. Lord Marcus, she said. Her voice rang clear as a bell in the silence. He looked up slowly. Behind his spectacles, his eyes were the color of storm clouds over the Atlantic, gray and deep and utterly terrified. Blood dripped from his cut palm onto his knee. Lady Serafina, he whispered. The stutter had vanished for just a moment, replaced by pure shock. She could feel the entire ballroom holding its breath. You are bleeding, she said softly. She reached into her bodice and withdrew the lace handkerchief her mother had given her. It was expensive French-made, intended for delicate dabbing at the corners of her mouth. She knelt down beside Marcus in the champagne in the glass. The crowd gasped. A lady did not kneel, not in spilled wine, not in front of 300 witnesses, not beside a man everyone called mad. Serafina did not care. She took Marcus's bleeding hand in hers. His fingers were shaking violently, but his skin was warm. She wrapped the handkerchief around his palm, looping it twice, tying it with a neat bow. The white lace turned pink, then red. Thank you, he breathed. For a second, just a second, his hand steadied in hers. Serafina stood up. She extended her hand down to him. Stand up, my lord, she said. Marcus stared at her hand as if it were a miracle. Then slowly, carefully, he reached up and took it. His grip was tentative, afraid of breaking her. She pulled, and he rose to his feet. He was taller than she had realized. Most people never noticed because he spent his life hunched over trying to disappear. But standing straight, he was nearly 6 feet broad-shouldered beneath his worn coat. Serafina turned to face Victor Harrington. The merchant prince stood 10 feet away, his face frozen in an expression somewhere between shock and fury. Behind him, the crowd had gone utterly silent. You are mistaken, Mr. Harrington, Serafina said, her voice carried to the gallery. I cannot marry you. Victor's face went purple. Excuse me. My father may have agreed. Serafina continued, each word falling like a hammer blow. But I will not marry a man who finds joy in the humiliation of others. It shows a weakness of character that no amount of gold can hide. Someone in the crowd made a choking sound. It might have been laughter, it might have been shock. Victor took a step toward her, his hands clenching into fists. You have no other choice, he said, his voice shaking with rage. Who else would have you? You're a bankrupt's daughter, a pauper in a silk dress. I'm offering you salvation. Serafina looked at Marcus Ashford. He was staring at her as if she had grown wings. His bloodied hand wrapped in her lace handkerchief hung at his side. This was insane. This was social suicide. This was the end of everything. But looking into those gray eyes, she saw something she had not seen in Victor's kindness. And kindness, she decided in that moment, was worth more than all the gold in New York Harbor. Lord Marcus, she said, turning to him fully, I hear your estate in the Hudson Valley has a magnificent library. Marcus's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. And I hear, Serafina continued, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat, that you are in need of a wife to manage your household. Marcus looked at Victor, then at the crowd, then back at Serafina. Something shifted in his posture. His spine straightened, just an inch, just enough. I would be honored, he stammered. Then I accept, Serafina said. The silence that followed was absolute. Victor Harrington laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Fine, he spat. Marry the idiot. Marry the stuttering duke. You'll be begging at my door within a year, Serafina. You'll be starving in a cold castle with a husband who can't even string a sentence together. He leaned close, so close she could see the veins standing out on his neck. And when you come crawling back, I won't be waiting. Victor turned on his heel and stalked toward the exit. His boots struck the marble like gunshots. The crowd parted before him, murmuring uncertain. Behind Serafina, her mother made a sound like a wounded animal and collapsed. 2 footmen rushed to catch her before she hit the floor. Her father sat slumped in his chair, reaching for another glass with shaking hands. But Serafina did not let go of Marcus's hand, and he, trembling, terrified, held on as if she were the only solid thing in a world gone liquid. Did you? Marcus whispered so quietly only she could hear. Did you mean it? Serafina looked up at him. She had just destroyed her life. She had married the laughingstock of New York society. Her family would disown her. The creditors would take everything. She would have nothing. But for the first time in years, standing in champagne and broken glass with a bleeding stranger's hand in hers, she felt free. Yes, Marcus, she said. I meant it. Take me home. They were married 3 days after the Hamilton ball, in a ceremony so small it bordered on clandestine. The vicar was drunk and rushed through the vows as if the words burned his tongue. Serafina's father did not attend. He sent a letter instead, delivered by a footman who would not meet her eyes. The letter contained 2 sentences. You have made your choice. We are finished. Her mother sent nothing. The carriage ride north to Ashford Manor took another 4 days. Marcus sat opposite her in the carriage, a leather-bound book open in his lap, his eyes never quite meeting hers. Whenever she spoke, he flinched slightly, as if expecting a blow. When she asked questions, his stutter grew so severe that she eventually stopped asking. It was easier to let the silence stretch. They traveled through a landscape transforming from the manicured wealth of Manhattan to the wild, rocky terrain of the Hudson Valley. The city's brick townhouses gave way to farmland, then forest, then the stark beauty of cliffs overlooking a steel-gray river. On the 3rd day, as they climbed into the Catskill foothills, Marcus offered her water from a canteen. His hand shook so badly that water slopped onto her dress. I'm sorry, he stammered, pulling back as if she might strike him. It's only water, Serafina said gently. He nodded but did not speak again for the rest of the day. She spent the hours watching the landscape and wondering what she had done. Victor had been cruel, yes, but he had also been powerful, safe. With Victor, she would have had a townhouse in Manhattan servant security. She would have been miserable, but she would have survived. With Marcus, she had nothing. A failing estate, a husband who could barely speak, a future as uncertain as morning fog. They arrived at Ashford Manor at dusk on the 4th day. The estate sat on a cliff overlooking the Hudson River, 3 stories of dark stone that seemed to grow from the rock itself. Ivy crawled up the walls. Several windows were shuttered. The gravel drive was overgrown with weeds. It was not the ruin Victor had predicted, but it was austere, cold, lonely. The carriage stopped before the main entrance and Marcus climbed out first, then turned to help her down. His hand was still bandaged with her lace handkerchief, now brown with old blood. Welcome home, my lady, he stammered. It is not much, but it is safe. Safe, an odd word to emphasize. The front door opened and 2 figures emerged. The first was an elderly man in a butler's livery that had seen better decades. He had kind eyes and a slight stoop to his shoulders. Caldwell, Marcus said, the stutter lessening slightly. This is Lady Ashford. Caldwell bowed deeply. My lady, welcome to Ashford Manor. We are honored. The second figure was a woman of perhaps 55, rail-thin and severe, with gray hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to pull her entire face with it. Her black dress was spotless. Her expression was not welcoming. Mrs. Graves, Marcus said, a housekeeper. Mrs. Graves executed a curtsy so brief it was almost an insult. Her eyes swept over Serafina from head to toe, cataloging every detail, finding her wanting. My lord, Mrs. Graves said, her voice was flat as a blade. Shall I prepare the usual rooms? Yes, Marcus said. The blue room for Lady Ashford. The study for me. Separate bedrooms, of course. Caldwell took their bags. Mrs. Graves turned without another word and disappeared into the house's dark interior. Marcus stood on the gravel, his hands twisting together, his eyes on his boots. I'll show you to your room, he said quietly. The blue room was on the 2nd floor at the end of a long hallway lined with portraits of stern-faced Ashfords long dead. The room itself was spacious with a 4-poster bed, a writing desk, and a window that looked out over the river. It was also freezing. I'll have C. Caldwell bring more coal, Marcus said from the doorway. He would not step inside. Dinner is at 7 or whenever you wish. I can have it sent to your room if you prefer. Marcus, Serafina said, turning to face him. He flinched. Why did you agree to marry me? She asked. He looked at her for a long moment, his gray eyes unreadable behind his spectacles. Then he looked away. Because you were kind, he said softly. And I have not seen kindness in a long time. He left before she could respond, closing the door gently behind him. Serafina sat down on the bed and looked around her new home. The portraits on the walls stared down at her with judgment in their painted eyes. Beyond the window, the river churned gray and cold in the fading light. She had made her choice. Now she would live with it. That night she could not sleep. The bed was comfortable enough and Caldwell had indeed brought more coal, but sleep would not come. She lay in the darkness, listening to the house settle around her, the old wood creaking and groaning like a ship at sea. Sometime past midnight, she heard footsteps in the hallway. They were soft, careful, trying not to be heard. They passed her door and continued down the corridor toward the west wing. Serafina sat up, her heart suddenly pounding. More footsteps, different ones, heavier. At least two men, maybe three. She slipped out of bed and crossed to the door, pressing her ear against the wood. The footsteps had stopped. Somewhere below, a door opened and closed. Voices murmured too low to make out words. This was madness. She should stay in her room, lock the door, mind her own business. But Serafina had not chosen safety at the Hamilton ball. She had chosen truth, however terrifying. She pulled on her dressing gown and opened the door. The hallway was dark except for a single candle burning in a wall sconce. The portraits seemed to watch her as she crept toward the west wing, her bare feet silent on the cold floorboards. At the end of the corridor was a heavy oak door. Light showed beneath it. From beyond came the murmur of voices. One of them was Marcus, except Marcus was not stuttering. Serafina froze her hand on the doorframe. The British agents landed in Boston 3 days ago. Marcus's voice came through the door, clear and crisp and utterly without impediment. They're moving south along the coast. The Interim War Council wants confirmation before they act. Another voice unfamiliar. And you're certain they're targeting the provisional government? Certain enough, Marcus replied. The intelligence from Philadelphia is clear. They want chaos before General Washington's inauguration in April. If they can destabilize the transition, the British think the whole republic will collapse. A third voice. What do you need from us? Eyes on the New York docks, Marcus said. Victor Harrington's warehouses in particular. He's been moving shipments that don't match his manifests. Either he's smuggling or he's a middleman for someone who is. Victor. Serafina's blood went cold. Harrington's dangerous, the first voice said. He has half the merchants in his pocket. If he discovers you're investigating him, he won't, Marcus interrupted. No one suspects the village idiot. That's the point. Silence. Then the sound of papers rustling. The new wife, the third voice said. Was that planned? A pause. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had changed. Softer. Almost vulnerable. No, he said. That was unexpected. Is she a risk? I don't know yet. Footsteps approached the door from inside. Serafina turned and ran, her heart hammering, her feet nearly silent on the floorboards. She made it back to her room and closed the door just as she heard the oak door open down the hall. She stood in the darkness, her back against the door, breathing hard. Marcus was not who he seemed. The stutter was a lie. The fear was a performance. He was investigating Victor Harrington for crimes she did not understand. He spoke of British agents and government secrets and intelligence networks. Her husband was a spion, and she had just stumbled into the middle of a war. Serafina did not return to bed. She sat in the darkness by the window, watching the river turn from black to gray as dawn approached her mind, racing through everything she had heard. British agents, government secrets, Victor Harrington moving illegal shipments, and Marcus trembling, stuttering, Marcus at the center of it all, speaking with the confidence of a man who commanded others. The pieces did not fit together, or rather, they fit too well. The expensive candles she had noticed burning in his study despite the manor's obvious poverty. The late-night riders, the way he had said the estate was safe with such particular emphasis. The military-grade knife he had given her in the carriage. Nothing about Marcus Ashford was what it seemed. When dawn finally broke, Serafina made a decision. She would not cower in ignorance. She would not be a pawn moved blindly across someone else's board. If she had married into danger, she would face it with her eyes open. She dressed carefully in a simple day dress and descended to breakfast. The dining room was on the ground floor, a long chamber with windows overlooking the gardens. Marcus sat at the far end of a table that could have seated 20, hunched over a plate of untouched eggs. When she entered, he started violently, nearly knocking over his teacup. Lady Serafina, he stammered, half rising from his chair. I didn't expect... Good morning, Marcus, she said, taking a seat at the opposite end of the table. Caldwell appeared from nowhere to pour her tea. I trust you slept well. Yes, quite well, thank you. His hands were shaking, the stutter was back in full force. If she had not heard him speaking clearly just hours ago, she would have believed it genuine. He was an extraordinary actor. They ate in silence. Marcus kept his eyes on his plate, cutting his food into smaller and smaller pieces without eating any of it. After 10 minutes, he pushed back from the table. I must attend to some matters, he mumbled, in the West Wing. But please make yourself at home. He fled. Serafina sipped her tea and waited until his footsteps faded. Then she turned to Caldwell, who had remained standing by the sideboard. Caldwell, she said, tell me about the West Wing. The butler's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. Caution, perhaps, or assessment. The West Wing contains Lord Ashford's private study, my lady, he said carefully. He spends most of his days there. He prefers not to be disturbed. What does he do there? I could not say, my lady. Cannot or will not, Caldwell met her gaze steadily. Lord Ashford values his privacy. Before Serafina could press further, Mrs. Graves entered the dining room with a tea tray. The housekeeper's face was set in its usual expression of tight-lipped disapproval. More tea, my lady, Mrs. Graves asked, her tone suggesting that more tea was the last thing Serafina deserved. No, thank you, but I would appreciate a tour of the house. Miss Graves's mouth thinned further. As you wish. The tour took an hour. Miss Graves showed Serafina through the ground floor parlors, all of them dusty and disused. The library on the second floor, its shelves half empty. The morning room, the drawing room, the conservatory with its dead plants and cracked glass. They did not go to the West Wing. And Lord Ashford's study, Serafina asked as they stood in the second floor hallway, is private, my lady. I am his wife. Even so. Mrs. Graves turned to face her fully, and for the first time there was something other than disapproval in her expression. It might have been pity. Lord Ashford has his peculiarities. It's best not to disturb him when he's working. Working on what? Mrs. Graves sniffed. His toy soldiers, my lady. He has hundreds of them. Arranges them on maps for hours at a time. Moves them about like a child playing at war. Her voice dripped with disdain. The village calls him Mad Marcus. They say he talks to ghosts. Serafina kept her face neutral. Toy soldiers on maps. Not quite the truth, but close enough that someone watching from the outside might believe it. How long have you served him? Serafina asked. 10 years, my lady, since before his father died. And in all that time, you've never wondered what he does in that study. Mrs. Graves' expression hardened. It is not my place to wonder, my lady. Nor is it yours. The housekeeper turned and walked away, her shoes clicking sharply on the floorboards. Serafina waited until she was gone, then walked to the end of the corridor. The oak door stood closed and silent. She tried the handle. Locked. Of course. She returned to her room and opened the writing desk. Inside, she found paper, ink, and a set of quills. She also found something else, a small, leather-bound notebook hidden in a false bottom of the drawer. The notebook contained rows of numbers. No words, no explanations. Just sequences of digits that meant nothing to her. But the pattern was there, she could see it. Every third number was higher than the ones around it. Every fifth sequence began with a 0. It was a code. Serafina had learned basic cryptography from her father before his gambling had consumed him. When she was 12, they had spent a winter translating Caesar's Gallic Wars from Latin, and he had shown her how the Romans encrypted their military dispatches using substitution ciphers. This was more complex than Caesar's simple shift, but the principle was the same. The number stood for letters. She just needed to find the key. She spent the afternoon working on it, filling page after page with attempts. By the time the light began to fail, her eyes burned and her fingers were stained with ink, but she had decoded the first line. Shipment arrived Boston Harbor March 3rd. The second line, weapons confirmed. British manufacture. The third, Harrington connection suspected. She sat back staring at the words. This was not the notebook of a madman playing with toy soldiers. This was intelligence, surveillance, evidence. A knock at her door made her jump. She shoved the notebook back into the drawer just as Caldwell's voice came through the wood. My lady, dinner is served. Marcus was already seated when she entered the dining room. He looked exhausted, his face pale, his eyes red-rimmed. He barely touched his food. Serafina watched him across the expanse of polished oak and made another decision. Marcus, she said. He flinched. Yes. Why do you hide from me? His fork clattered against his plate. Don't. You do, she said gently. We're married, Marcus. We're supposed to be partners. Or we should be. She paused. Mrs. Graves says you play with toy soldiers all day. Is that true? Marcus went rigid. His eyes darted toward the door, checking if the servants were listening. For just a moment, less than a heartbeat, the stutter disappeared. Is that what she says? Then it was back, his shoulders slumping, his voice breaking. Yes, I suppose. It passes the time. He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. Please excuse me, I'm not feeling well. He was gone before she could stop him. Serafina sat alone in the dining room, listening to his footsteps fade into the upper floors. She waited 10 minutes, then rose and walked quietly toward the west wing. The hallway was dark. No candles burned in the sconces tonight. She felt her way along the wall until she reached the oak door. Light showed beneath it. She could hear Marcus's voice inside, clear and unbroken, speaking to someone. The shipment manifest doesn't match the cargo, he was saying. Harrington declared textiles. The dock workers saw rifles. Another voice, one she did not recognize. How many, Pam? At least 200. British military issue. Someone's arming an insurgency and Harrington's the middleman. Can you prove it? Not yet, but I will. Serafina pressed her ear closer to the door. Her heart hammered so hard she was certain they would hear it. What about the girl? The other voice asked. Your wife. Does she suspect? A long pause. I don't know, Marcus said finally. She's clever. Too clever to fool for long. Then what will you do? What I must. The mission comes first. The conversation continued, but Serafina had heard enough. She turned to go and her foot caught on the edge of a floorboard. It creaked. Inside the room, the voices stopped. Someone's there, the stranger said. Footsteps approached the door. Fast. Serafina ran. She made it back to her room and closed the door just as she heard the oak door open. She stood in the darkness, breathing hard, listening to the footsteps move down the corridor. They stopped outside her room. A long silence. Then the footsteps retreated. Serafina slid down to sit on the floor, her back against the door, her hands shaking. She was in far deeper than she had realized. The next morning, she woke to find a note slipped under her door. The handwriting was elegant, precise. Library, noon, come alone. M. She found him there at exactly 12, standing by the window that overlooked the river. He did not turn when she entered. You heard us last night, he said. No stutter, no hesitation. Yes. I thought so. He turned to face her, and without the mask of fear, he was almost unrecognizable. His spine was straight. His shoulders were square. His gray eyes were sharp and assessing. How much did you hear? Enough to know you're not what you pretend to be. A muscle worked in his jaw. And what am I, Serafina? A spy, she said simply, working for the government, investigating Victor Harrington and British weapons smuggling. He studied her for a long moment. Then to her surprise, he smiled. It transformed his face. You're right, he said, about all of it. He walked to the library door, locked it, then gestured to the chairs by the fireplace. Sit, please. It's time you knew the truth. They sat facing each other across the cold hearth. Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. I've been working for the Provisional War Council for 3 years, he said. Colonel Hamilton recruited me before my father died. The stutter, the fear, the reputation as a fool, it's all theater. A mask I wear so that people speak freely around me. No one suspects the village idiot. No one guards their tongue near a man they think too stupid to understand. And Victor, Serafina asked, is more dangerous than you know. Marcus's expression darkened. He's not just smuggling weapons. He's coordinating with British agents who want to destabilize the new government before General Washington takes office as president in April. If they succeed in creating enough chaos, they believe the Republic will collapse and the colonies will beg Britain to take them back. And you're trying to stop them. I'm trying to gather enough evidence to arrest everyone involved, but it has to be airtight. If I move too soon, the conspirators will scatter and we'll never catch them all. He paused. That's why I need to stay hidden, why the mask is so important. And me, Serafina asked quietly. Was I part of the mask? Marcus looked away. At first I thought you might be. A wife would make the disguise more convincing. A beautiful woman married to the fool would distract people, make them talk even more carelessly. He met her eyes again. But that's not why I agreed to marry you. Then why? Because you knelt in the broken glass, he said softly. Because you saw a man everyone called worthless and treated him like a human being. Because for 5 minutes, you made me wish I wasn't just a ghost in my own life. The admission hung between them in the silence. I've put you in danger by bringing you here, Marcus continued. Harrington knows this location is active. He doesn't know it's me specifically, but he knows someone at Ashford Manor is funneling information. That's why he came to the ball. That's why he wanted you. He thought controlling you would give him leverage. Serafina's hands clenched on the arms of the chair. He wanted to use me. Yes, and now that you refused him, he'll be looking for other ways to get to me. To you. Marcus stood and walked to a bookshelf. He pressed a hidden catch and a panel swung open, revealing a small pistol. He brought it to her. This is loaded. Do you know how to use it? No. I'll teach you, along with everything else you'll need to know to survive this. Serafina looked at the weapon in her hands. It was small, designed for a woman's grip, but the weight of it was terrifying and exhilarating at once. What if I don't want to just survive? She asked, looking up at him. What if I want to help? Marcus stared at her. You don't know what you're asking. Don't I? She set the pistol aside and stood. You need evidence against Harrington. You need to infiltrate his network. You need eyes and ears in places you can't go. She moved closer. I grew up in New York society. I know how to read people. I know how to lie convincingly. And Victor Harrington underestimated me once. He'll do it again. Serafina? Show me, she said. Show me what you do. Let me prove I can help. He studied her for a long moment, then he walked to the door, unlocked it, and led her down the corridor to the West Wing. The oak door opened onto a room that made her breath catch. It was indeed a library, but it was also so much more. Maps covered every wall, detailed charts of the eastern seaboard, the Atlantic shipping lanes, the Canadian border. The toy soldiers Mrs. Graves had mentioned were there, but they were arranged on the maps with precise military organization, marking troop positions, supply lines, naval blockades. Papers covered every surface. Stacks of letters in different hands, some with burned edges, others covered in numerical codes. Ciphers, dispatches, intelligence reports. In the center of the room stood a massive table with a map of New York Harbor. Wooden markers indicated ships' warehouses, routes. A red marker sat on Victor Harrington's name. My God, Serafina breathed. Marcus closed the door behind them. This is the Northern Intelligence Network. Every piece of information from the Canadian border to Virginia comes through this room. I coordinate agents, decode messages, track threats. He walked to the table. Right now, the biggest threat is a coordinated British operation to undermine the transition government. Harrington is one of several merchants funding it, but he's the key. If we can take him down, the rest will fall. Serafina moved to the table studying the map. She could see the pattern immediately. The shipping routes all converged on 3 warehouses in Lower Manhattan. These, she said, pointing, these are his distribution points. Marcus came to stand beside her. How did you see that so fast? My father used to take me to the docks when I was young, before the gambling consumed him. I learned to read shipping manifests. She traced the routes with her finger. If he's smuggling weapons, he'd need to move them quickly through multiple points to avoid detection. These 3 warehouses allow him to split cargo and reroute as needed. Marcus was staring at her with something like wonder. You see patterns. I see logistics. It's not so different from managing a household, just larger scale. She turned to face him. Let me help you. Teach me your codes. Let me analyze your intelligence. I can be useful. It's dangerous. I know. Teach me anyway. He studied her face, searching for something. Then he nodded slowly. All right, he said, but we start small. First, I need to know if you can keep secrets under pressure. He walked to the desk and pulled out a coded letter. Cipher this. It's a basic substitution cipher. If you can break it in under 2 minutes, we'll talk about the next step. Serafina took the letter and studied it. The symbols were unfamiliar, but the pattern was there. Every language had common letters, ET-AO in English. She looked for the most frequent symbols and began substituting. 90 seconds later, she handed it back. British contact confirmed in Philadelphia. Meeting set for March 15th. Await further instructions. Marcus's eyebrows rose. You've done this before. My father taught me. Before he lost himself in cards and wine, he was a brilliant man. He showed me Caesar's ciphers, Vigenère squares, basic cryptanalysis. She met his eyes. I told you I could be useful. For the first time since she had met him, Marcus Ashford smiled. A real smile, wide and genuine. Welcome to the war, Lady Ashford. The next 3 weeks transformed Serafina's life entirely. Marcus taught her everything. Ciphers and codes, substitution, transposition, book codes using Shakespeare as the key. How to make invisible ink from lemon juice and reveal it with heat. How to recognize a tale in a crowded market by watching for patterns in movement. How to slip a message into a handshake. How to read the tension in a man's jaw that meant he was lying. He taught her to shoot the small pistol, taking her to a clearing deep in the forest where the sound would not carry. The first time the weapon kicked in her hand, she nearly dropped it. The 10th time she hit the target. He taught her to fight. Not gentleman's boxing, but dirty street fighting, how to use her smaller size as an advantage, where to strike to disable a larger opponent, how to turn household objects into weapons. In return, Serafina taught Marcus what she knew: how to read a room, not just a person, how to use charm instead of silence to deflect attention. How society gossip could be. Intelligence gold wives knew things their husbands said, mistresses knew things wives didn't, and servants knew everything. She showed him how being underestimated was its own form of invisibility. Men looked at a beautiful woman and saw decoration, not danger. That blindness could be weaponized. They worked late into the nights in the war room, candlelight flickering over maps and coded dispatches. A strange intimacy grew between them in those hours. Not romance, not yet, but something deeper: trust forged in shared secrets and mutual respect. One night as they worked to decode a particularly complex message, Marcus's hand accidentally covered hers on the table. They both froze. Neither pulled away. "We make a good team," Serafina said quietly. "The best I've ever had," Marcus replied. They stayed like that for a long moment, hands touching the coded message forgotten. Then Caldwell knocked on the door with news that broke the spell. "My lord, a rider has arrived. He says it's urgent." The rider brought a dispatch from Philadelphia. Marcus read it, his face going pale. "What is it?" Serafina asked. "Victor Harrington is coming here. Tomorrow. He's demanding to see his property." Marcus looked up, his gray eyes hard. "He's going to test us, to see if we're what we pretend to be." "Then we give him a performance," Serafina said, "the best one of our lives." Victor Harrington arrived at noon the next day in a black carriage pulled by 4 matched horses. He brought 6 armed men with him. Marcus met them in the entrance hall, every inch the trembling fool. His hands shook. His stutter was severe. He dropped his hat twice before Caldwell rescued it. Mr. H. Harrington," he stammered. What an unexpected visit." Victor swept past him without acknowledgement, his eyes scanning the shabby furnishings, the threadbare carpets. His lip curled. "Still living in squalor, I see." He turned to face Marcus with undisguised contempt. "Where is she? Where is the girl who chose you over me?" I'm here, Mr. Harrington." Serafina descended the stairs slowly, her expression carefully neutral. She wore a simple day dress, her hair pulled back. She looked demure, trapped exactly as Victor expected. His smile was a predator's smile. "Serafina, you look tired. Has married life with the village idiot worn you down already?" "Mr. Harrington," she said coolly, "to what do we owe this intrusion?" "Intrusion," Victor laughed. "I'm merely checking on an old friend, making sure you haven't come to regret your unfortunate decision." He moved closer, invading her space. "Though from the look of this place, I'd say regret has already set in." Behind him, Marcus cowered by the staircase, wringing his hands. Please, Mr. H. Harrington, don't be cruel to my wife." "Shut up, Ashford." Victor didn't even look at him. His eyes were fixed on Serafina. "I have a proposition, my dear. Not for the idiot, but for you. My business partners need a safe location for certain shipments. Ashford Manor's isolation makes it perfect. If you can convince your husband to sign over temporary usage rights, there would be substantial compensation. Enough to fix this crumbling heap." He leaned close, his breath hot on her face. "Enough to buy yourself a proper life." It was bribery, or blackmail, or both, and it confirmed everything Marcus had suspected. Victor needed access to Ashford Manor, which meant he didn't know yet who was working against him from here. I don't understand, but business," Marcus wailed from behind them. He began knocking his knees together, creating a distraction. Victor rolled his eyes and turned to shout at him. "For God's sake, man, stand still." In that split second, while Victor was distracted, Serafina made her move. She had practiced this 1,000 times with Marcus. The casual stumble, the steadying hand, the dip into a pocket so smooth it was invisible. She swayed slightly, as if dizzy. Victor instinctively reached out to steady her. Her hand slipped into his coat pocket, found the folded paper there, and palmed it in one fluid motion. "Oh dear," she gasped, pressing the paper against her palm with her handkerchief. "I feel faint." "Pathetic," Victor muttered, pushing her away. He adjusted his coat, not noticing the missing document. "Think on my offer, Serafina. You have 1 week. After that, I'll tell the creditors where to find your father, and we both know what they'll do to him." He turned and strode out, his boots clicking sharply on the marble. His guards followed. The door slammed behind them. The moment the carriage wheels crunched on the gravel drive, Marcus dropped the act. The trembling stopped. He crossed to the window and watched until Victor was out of sight. "Did you get it?" he asked, his voice steady and strong. Serafina held up the folded paper. Her hands were shaking, not from fear but from exhilaration. "I got it. Marcus took the paper to the window and unfolded it carefully. His face went pale. My God. What is it? Serafina moved to his side. The document was written in French, dated 3 weeks earlier. It bore the seal of a Jacobin tribunal in Paris. It's a letter of introduction, Marcus said, slowly translating as he read. From the revolutionary government in France to loyal supporters in the American colonies. It lists names, 23 of them, senators, merchants, military officers. He looked at Serafina, his eyes wide. It's the entire conspiracy, everyone working to destabilize the government. Is Victor's name there, second on the list? Right after, Marcus stopped his finger on a name. General Harrison Cole, the war hero, the traitor. Marcus's hand tightened on the paper. Cole has access to President-elect Washington. He's part of the security detail for the inauguration. If he's compromised, the implication hung in the air like poison. They're not just trying to create chaos, Serafina said quietly. They're planning to assassinate Washington. Marcus nodded slowly. And we have less than 5 weeks to stop them. He turned to face her fully, and for the first time she saw fear in his eyes. Not the pretend fear of his fool's mask, but real terror. Serafina, this is bigger than smuggling. Bigger than I thought. If they succeed, if Washington dies before he takes office, the Republic dies with him. Everything we fought for in the war gone, and you're now a target because you're connected to me. She took his hand. His skin was warm, his fingers strong. Then we stop them, she said firmly. Together. Partners. Marcus looked at their joined hands, then up at her face. Something shifted in his expression, something vulnerable and honest. I have never had a partner I could trust with my life, he said softly. Now you do. They stood together in the fading afternoon light, holding hands, the letter of introduction between them, like a declaration of war. Over the next week, they worked 18-hour days decoding the conspiracy layer by layer. The letter contained coded references to meetings, payments, and something called the winter gift. A gift that keeps giving, Serafina read from a decoded message, to be delivered at the Winter Assembly. The Winter Assembly, Marcus said, pulling out a society calendar. It's a gala at Schuyler Mansion. 4 weeks from now, the night before Washington's inauguration. 300 guests. The entire New York elite. Will Washington attend? He's scheduled to give a speech. Show unity before taking office. Marcus's face was grim. If I were planning an assassination, that's where I'd strike. They needed more intelligence. They needed to get inside Victor's operation. And for that, they needed to take a risk. I have an idea, Serafina said, but you're not going to like it. 3 days later, Serafina stood in front of Victor Harrington's warehouse on the Manhattan docks. It was past midnight. The streets were empty except for the rats and the occasional drunk stumbling home. Marcus stood beside her, dressed in dark clothes, his face blackened with soot. The fool's mask was completely gone. In its place was a soldier, focused and deadly. Last chance to back out, he whispered. Not a chance. They had spent 2 days planning this raid. The warehouse was Victor's main distribution point for smuggled weapons. If they could get inside, photograph the manifests, and get out without being seen, they would have the physical evidence they needed. Serafina approached the side door. She pulled a set of lockpicks from her pocket, another skill Marcus had taught her, and went to work. The lock was good quality, but not good enough. After 90 seconds, it clicked open. They slipped inside. The warehouse was vast, 3 stories tall, filled with crates and barrels stacked to the ceiling. Moonlight filtered through grimy windows high above. The smell of tar and tobacco hung heavy in the air. Marcus led the way deeper into the building, moving with the silent precision of a trained operative. Serafina followed, her heart hammering, but her hands steady. They found the office on the 2nd floor, inside a desk covered with papers, ledgers, shipping manifests. And there, in a locking drawer that Serafina picked in under a minute, a book bound in red leather. Marcus opened it and began photographing pages with a small camera, working quickly and methodically. The book contained everything: payment schedules to 23 conspirators, weapons, inventories, shipping routes, and most damning, a detailed timeline for the winter gift. It's a bomb, Marcus breathed, reading the specifications. Time to detonate during Washington's speech. Hidden in a floral arrangement to be delivered to the presidential box. How much explosive? Enough to kill everyone within 30 feet. Washington, his advisors, half the Continental Congress. A sound from below froze them both. Footsteps. Voices. The night guards making their rounds. We need to go, Marcus whispered. Now. They moved toward the door, but the footsteps were coming up the stairs. Too close. Too fast. Marcus grabbed Serafina's hand and pulled her toward the window. Can you climb? We're 3 stories up. Trust me. He opened the window and looked out. A drain pipe ran down the side of the building, old and rusted, but potentially strong enough to hold them. Below the alley was dark and empty. The footsteps reached the landing. Marcus went first, testing the pipe. It held. He reached up for Serafina. Come on, quickly! She climbed out the window and grabbed the pipe. Her dress snagged on the window frame. She yanked it free, heard fabric tear. Didn't care. The metal was cold and slick under her hands. The office door opened. Someone's been in here, a guard shouted. The drawer's open. Serafina and Marcus descended as fast as they dared. The pipe groaned and shifted under their weight. 20 feet from the ground, one of the brackets pulled free from the wall. They fell. Marcus landed first and broke her fall, both of them hitting the cobblestones hard. Pain shot through Serafina's ankle. Marcus's lip was split, bleeding. Run, he gasped. They ran. Behind them, the guards reached the window. There stopped them. A gunshot cracked through the night. The bullet sparked off the cobblestones 2 feet from Serafina's head. Marcus pulled a pistol from his coat and fired back without looking, the shot wild, but enough to make the guards duck. They rounded a corner into a maze of alleys. 2 more guards appeared ahead of them, blocking the way. Big men with clubs. Go around, Marcus shouted, but there was no time. The first guard swung his club at Marcus's head. Marcus ducked, came up inside the man's guard, and drove his elbow into the guard's throat. The man went down choking. The second guard grabbed Serafina. She didn't think. She reached for the knife hidden in her dress. Marcus had insisted she carry it and drove it into the guard's thigh. The feeling of the blade sliding through muscle and hitting bone made her stomach turn. The guard screamed and fell, clutching his leg. Blood poured between his fingers, black in the moonlight. Sarah, come on! Marcus grabbed her hand. They ran through 3 more blocks of twisting alleys before finally stopping in an abandoned courtyard, both gasping for breath. Marcus's split lip was bleeding badly. Serafina's hands were shaking uncontrollably. You stabbed him, Marcus said, staring at her. I know. Her voice came out high and thin. I felt it. I felt the knife go in. You saved us. If he'd caught you. I know. She looked down at her shaking hands. There was blood on them, not hers. Oh God, Marcus, I stabbed a man. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. You did what you had to do, what I trained you to do, and you did it perfectly. She pressed her face against his chest, breathing hard, trying not to be sick. She had just permanently crossed a line. She was no longer just helping gather intelligence. She had shed blood. She had wounded another human being and watched him fall. Does it get easier? She whispered. No, Marcus said honestly, but you learn to carry it. They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other in the darkness. Then Marcus pulled back and looked at her face. We got what we needed, he said. The photographs, the evidence. We can stop this. What about the guards? They saw us. They saw me. They saw a woman in the dark. They don't know who you are. And by the time Victor realizes someone broke in, we'll be long gone. He cupped her face in his hands. You were extraordinary tonight. I was terrified. Terrified and extraordinary aren't mutually exclusive. He smiled, then winced as his split lip cracked open again. Come on, let's get you home. They made it back to the Ashford townhouse as dawn was breaking over the East River. Caldwell took one look at them, Marcus bleeding, Serafina's dress, torn, both covered in dirt and soot, and simply said, I'll draw baths and have the doctor sent for. Discreetly. That night, after the doctor had stitched Marcus's lip and confirmed that Serafina's ankle was only sprained, not broken, they sat together in the war room going through the photographs. The evidence was devastating. Names, dates, amounts. A complete record of treason. More than enough to hang every man on the list. We have them, Serafina said. We can take this to Colonel Hamilton. End this right now. Not yet, Marcus set down the photographs. If we arrest them before the gala, we don't get the bomb. Without the physical bomb, they can claim these documents are forgeries. Their lawyers will tie this up in courts for years. Some of them will escape. So what do? We let them think they're succeeding. We go to the gala. We wait for them to deliver the bomb, and then we catch them with it. Red-handed, public, undeniable. He looked at her. But it means walking into danger. Real danger. They'll have the bomb. They'll have guards. If anything goes wrong, then we make sure nothing goes wrong. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his desk and pulled out a small glass vial filled with clear liquid. This is a precaution, he said. Belladonna, foxglove, and other compounds. If you drink it, your heart rate will slow dramatically. You'll appear dead for approximately 30 minutes. Serafina stared at the vial. You think I might need to fake my own death? I think if Victor captures you, he won't kill you quickly. He'll use you against me. This gives you an escape. His voice was steady, but his eyes were dark with worry. Drink this, and you'll have 30 minutes of apparent death. I can get you out, revive you. But you have to understand after 30 minutes, the effects become dangerous. After 45, you risk brain damage. After 60, it becomes permanent. She took the vial feeling its weight. Such a small thing. Such a terrible choice it represented. I won't let it come to that, Marcus said fiercely. I won't lose you, Serafina. Not after everything. She looked up at him. Is that Marcus the spy talking? Or Marcus the man both? He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. I didn't plan this, any of it. The marriage was supposed to be cover, convenient camouflage, but you... He stopped searching for words. You see me, not the fool I pretend to be, not the spy I have to be. Just me. I see you, she whispered. He leaned closer. She could feel his breath on her face, see the gray of his eyes in the candlelight. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her. Then he pulled back his jaw tight. Get some rest, he said, his voice rough. We have 2 weeks until the gala, and a lot of work to do. He left before she could respond. Serafina sat alone in the war room, the vial of poison in one hand, her heart full of things she could not yet say. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus and Serafina worked day and night planning every detail of what they were calling Operation Patriot. They would attend the Winter Assembly as Lord and Lady Ashford the Fool and his unfortunate wife. Marcus would maintain his stutter, his trembling, his reputation. Serafina would play the trapped woman, quietly miserable. While the guests danced and drank, they would be watching, waiting for the bomb. Marcus had sent the photographs to Colonel Hamilton in Philadelphia via secure courier. Hamilton's response had been immediate and unequivocal. Let them hang themselves, catch them with the bomb, but keep President-elect Washington safe at all costs. On the morning of the gala, a courier arrived from New York with devastating news. It's a warrant, Marcus said, reading the document. His face had gone pale. Victor filed a formal complaint with the governor. He claims I kidnapped you, that you're being held against your will. That's absurd. It doesn't matter. The warrant gives them authority to search Ashford Manor tomorrow, the day after the gala. If they find the war room, every agent I've protected the entire network. He stopped, his hand clenching on the paper. They'll dismantle it all. He's timing it deliberately, Serafina said. He wants us away from the assembly, or he wants to flush us out. Either way, we're trapped. Marcus set the letter down carefully. If we stay, we lose the network. If we go to the gala, defying the warrant, we become fugitives. Then we become fugitives. Serafina stood, her decision made. The network can be rebuilt. Washington's life can't be restored. Marcus looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. You understand what you're saying. After tonight, there's no going back. You'll be branded a criminal. Everything you've known is already gone. My family disowned me. Society mocked me. I have nothing left to lose. She moved to stand beside him. Except this, except the chance to matter. He reached out and took her hand. I love you, he said quietly. I think I have since the moment you knelt in the broken glass. The words hung in the air between them. I love you too, Serafina whispered. My magnificent, infuriating spy. He pulled her close and kissed her. Not the tentative, careful kiss of uncertainty, but something fierce and claiming and full of desperate promise. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. Tonight, he said, we save the Republic, and then we figure out the rest. Together, always. The Winter Assembly at Schuyler Mansion was the social event of the season. Serafina and Marcus arrived separately to avoid suspicion. He came first, stumbling through the grand entrance with profuse apologies to everyone he bumped into. She arrived 20 minutes later alone, playing the role of abandoned wife perfectly. The mansion was ablaze with light and music. 300 guests in their finest silks and satins swirled through the ballroom like a kaleidoscope. Crystal chandeliers threw fractured rainbows across the marble floor. An orchestra played from a raised platform at the far end, and there, dominating one side of the ballroom, was the floral arrangement. It was massive, 20 feet of white lilies and dark green foliage in an enormous silver urn. The scent was overwhelming, cloying. It sat directly beside the raised dais where President-elect Washington would give his speech. Serafina accepted a glass of champagne she had no intention of drinking and moved through the crowd, her eyes scanning for threats. She spotted General Harrison Cole near the presidential box chatting with Washington's security detail, keeping them distracted. She spotted Victor Harrington across the room, resplendent in a burgundy coat holding court with a cluster of wealthy merchants. He saw her and smiled. It was not a kind smile. And she spotted Marcus near the refreshment table, looking small and miserable and completely harmless. Their eyes met for just a moment. He gave the tiniest nod toward the upper gallery. The bomb wasn't in the flower arrangement. It was somewhere else. Serafina's mind raced. Where the flowers were too obvious, too watched. But where else could you hide a bomb large enough to kill Washington and everyone near him? She scanned the ballroom again, looking for anything out of place. Waiters carrying trays, musicians on their platform, guests milling about, security guards at the doors. Wait, one of the waiters was moving wrong, not circulating with champagne, not offering canapes, just walking with purpose toward the presidential box, carrying a smaller floral arrangement. Serafina focused on him. He was young, perhaps 20, with nervous eyes that kept darting to the clock. The arrangement in his hands was modest, maybe 2 feet tall, white lilies in a crystal vase. She shifted position to see it better, and her blood went cold. Among the flower stems barely visible was a thin line of fuse. The big arrangement was a decoy. The real bomb was being walked directly to Washington's seat. She looked for Marcus, but he had vanished into the crowd. She looked for security, but Cole had positioned himself between the guards and the presidential box, keeping them engaged in conversation. The waiter was 30 feet from the box. 25. 20. Washington entered the ballroom to thunderous applause. He began climbing the steps to the dais, waving to the crowd, completely unaware. Serafina had perhaps 90 seconds before the waiter reached the box, before he set down the vase. Before the timer, she could see it now. A small clockwork mechanism hidden in the flowers reached its preset detonation. She could not shout. A panic would cause a stampede. More people would die. She could not reach Marcus in time. She had only one option. Serafina moved. She crossed the ballroom floor at a speed just short of running, weaving between clusters of guests. Victor appeared suddenly in her path, grabbing her arm. "Serafina," he said, his smile sharp as glass. "How delightful. We should talk later," she snapped and wrenched her arm free with more force than he expected. She kept moving. The waiter was 15 feet from the box. 10. She could see the clockwork mechanism now, could see the hand ticking toward 12. 90 seconds? 60? 45? She did the only thing she could think of. She threw herself directly into the waiter's path. The collision was spectacular. They went down in a tangle of limbs and torn silk. The vase flew from the waiter's hands, arced through the air, and shattered on the marble floor. Flowers scattered, water sprayed, and the bomb, that crude iron sphere with its sizzling fuse and ticking clockwork, rolled across the polished floor like a child's ball. The ballroom went silent. 300 guests stared at the device rolling toward the presidential dais, at the fuse burning down, at the clock ticking toward detonation. Someone screamed. Then Marcus Ashford swung down from the chandelier above on a rope he must have secured while everyone was distracted by Washington's entrance. He landed in a perfect crouch between the crowd and the bomb. No stutter, no trembling, every movement precise and controlled. He kicked the bomb hard. It flew through the air in a perfect arc over the heads of screaming guests through the open balcony doors. Marcus raised the pistol in his right hand, where had that come from, and fired. The shot hit the iron sphere as it sailed over the balcony railing. The explosion was massive. The blast wave shattered every window facing the street. Flames billowed into the night sky. Debris rained down on the cobblestones below. Inside the ballroom, the concussion knocked guests off their feet. Plaster fell from the ceiling. The chandelier Marcus had swung from crashed to the floor in an explosion of crystal. But the ballroom itself was intact. The guests were alive. Washington stood frozen on the dais, unhurt, but visibly shaken. In the ringing silence that followed, Marcus Ashford stood in the center of the room, smoke rising from his pistol, dust coating his shabby coat. He was not hunched, not cowering. He stood like a soldier, straight and proud and utterly in command. "Secure all exits," he commanded, his voice carrying like thunder through the shocked silence. This was an assassination attempt on President-elect Washington. No one leaves this building. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The transformation was too complete, too shocking. This could not be the stuttering fool they all knew. Then General Harrison Cole made his fatal mistake. His hand went to his sword. Marcus's second pistol, he had two, was already trained on the general. I wouldn't, General Cole. Cole froze his hand on the hilt, his face ashen. You, you can't what stop you from murdering the president-elect? Marcus's voice was cold as winter iron. Presidential guards arrest General Harrison Cole. He is part of the conspiracy to assassinate General Washington. The guards looked confused, uncertain. One of them stepped forward. On whose authority? Mine. Alexander Hamilton descended from the upper gallery flanked by federal agents. He looked at Marcus with approval. Lord Ashford has been working under my direct orders for 3 years as an intelligence operative for the provisional government. Everything he says is true. Arrest General Cole. Hamilton turned to his agents. And find Victor Harrington. Now. But Victor was not trying to escape. He stood near the main doors, his face a mask of shock and rage, his hand moving inside his coat, toward a hidden pistol. He pulled the weapon free, turning toward Washington on the dais, one last desperate attempt to complete the mission. Serafina was closer. She had retrieved the knife hidden in her dress during the chaos of the explosion. Now she moved through the panicked crowd like a shadow, exactly as Marcus had taught her. Victor saw her, a heartbeat too late. His finger was on the trigger, the pistol rising toward Washington's chest. Serafina drove her knife into Victor's shoulder, angling upward, severing the tendons that controlled his gun hand. The technique Marcus had drilled into her 100 times. Disable, don't kill. The pistol clattered to the marble floor. Victor screamed, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. He stared at Serafina with absolute incomprehension. You, he gasped. You were nothing, nobody. Just a desperate girl. I was never nothing, Serafina said quietly, her voice steady despite the knife trembling in her bloody hand. You just never bothered to look. Federal agents swarmed Victor, forcing him to his knees. More agents were moving through the ballroom, arresting conspirators from the list in the French letter. Senators trying to flee. Merchants pleading innocence. Military officers demanding lawyers. All of them caught. General Washington descended from the dais, his bodyguards finally surrounding him properly. He walked directly to where Marcus stood, still holding his smoking pistols. Lord Ashford, Washington said. His voice was steady, but Serafina could see the shaken look in his eyes. Or should I say, Agent Ashford. Marcus holstered his pistols and bowed. Not the clumsy bow of a fool, but the crisp bow of a soldier. General Washington, are you unharmed, sir? Thanks to you. Washington's gaze shifted to Serafina, still holding the bloody knife, her dress torn from her collision with the waiter, her hair coming loose from its pins. And to your wife, I understand. Serafina Ashford, sir, she said and curtsied despite everything. Washington studied them both with those sharp, assessing eyes. Colonel Hamilton tells me you decoded the conspiracy, that you infiltrated the enemy's network, that you risked your lives to stop this attack. We both did, sir, Serafina said. Together, Washington's gaze moved between them, seeing the partnership, the trust, the blood they had shed to protect a republic not yet born. Then George Washington did something that made the entire ballroom gasp. He bowed to them both, not a slight nod, a full formal bow of respect. You have saved this republic before it could even begin, he said, his voice ringing through the silent ballroom. You have my eternal gratitude, and the gratitude of every citizen of this nation. The ballroom erupted, not in panic this time, but in confused, thunderous applause. The guests were only beginning to understand. The stuttering fool was a hero. His pauper wife was a spy. Everything they thought they knew had been a lie. Victor was dragged away, still screaming threats and curses. General Cole went in silence, his face blank with shock. 21 other conspirators were arrested within the hour, their names read aloud from the list in the French letter. It was over. Serafina found Marcus's hand in the chaos. He gripped hers tightly as if afraid she might disappear. We did it, she breathed. No, Marcus said, looking at her with something like wonder. You did it. You saw the real bomb. You stopped it. I would have been searching the upper galleries while Washington died. Partners, Serafina said firmly. We did it together. Hamilton approached them. We'll need detailed statements. But for tonight, he looked at their bloody, exhausted faces. For tonight, go home. You've earned your rest. Marcus nodded. Thank you, sir. They left Schuyler Mansion by a side entrance, avoiding the crowds and the questions and the suddenly fawning society that had mocked them for months. A carriage waited in the alley provided by Hamilton's agents. They climbed inside and sat in exhausted silence as the driver took them to the Ashford townhouse. Only when they were safely inside the door locked did Serafina finally allow herself to break. She collapsed into a chair, her hands shaking uncontrollably, her breath coming in gasps. The enormity of what they had done, what had almost happened, crashed over her like a wave. Marcus knelt beside her chair and took her trembling hands in his steady ones. Breathe, he said softly. Just breathe. You're safe. It's over. I stabbed him, she whispered. Victor, I felt the blade go in again. I've done it twice now. I've shed blood twice. You saved lives. Washington's life. Hundreds of lives. He squeezed her hands. You did what had to be done. Does the blood wash off? Her voice broke. Or do I carry it forever? You carry it, Marcus said honestly. But not alone. I'm here. I'll help you carry it. She looked at him through tears. At this man she had married in desperation 4 months ago. This stranger who had become her partner, her teacher, her love. What happens now, she asked. Now, Marcus stood and pulled her to her feet, wrapping his arms around her. Now we sleep. Tomorrow we give testimony. Next week trials, public ones. They'll face justice. He pulled back to look at her face. And after that, we decide what comes next. Together. Together, Serafina repeated, letting the words settle like a vow. Marcus reached up and gently brushed away her tears. I love you, Serafina Ashford, and I am not losing you. Not after everything. You won't have to. This time when he kissed her, it was not fierce or desperate. It was gentle. A promise, a beginning. Come on, he said, taking her hand. Let's go to bed. Actual sleep. We have a very long day ahead tomorrow. But as they climbed the stairs together, hands intertwined, Serafina knew that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it the same way they had faced everything else. Together, the trials lasted 3 weeks and captivated the city. Victor Harrington was sentenced to hang for treason. General Harrison Cole faced a military tribunal and was executed by firing squad at dawn on a gray March morning. 21 other conspirators received sentences ranging from life in prison to exile. The evidence was overwhelming. The French letter, the decoded messages, the photographs from the warehouse, the bomb itself reconstructed from the wreckage on the street below Schuyler Mansion. Victor's execution was public. Serafina did not attend, but Marcus did. He said he owed it to the Republic to watch justice served. When he returned to their townhouse that afternoon, he was quiet for a long time. It's done, he finally said. He died cursing your name and mine. Oh, good, Serafina said, and meant it. The week after the trials ended, they returned to Ashford Manor. The estate looked different in the spring sunlight. Or perhaps they looked at it differently now. The war room remained, but the desperate urgency was gone. The maps were updated with new intelligence, but the immediate crisis had passed. The work continued. Marcus still coordinated intelligence for Colonel Hamilton's network, but the rhythm had changed. There was time to breathe, to rest, to think about what came next. One morning, Caldwell brought a letter on a silver tray. The seal was Washington's personal insignia. Marcus opened it at the breakfast table, Serafina reading over his shoulder. Lord and Lady Ashford, the Republic owes you both a debt that can never be repaid. You have served with distinction, courage, and unfailing loyalty. I write to you now not as president-elect, but as a general who recognizes talent when he sees it. France grows more unstable by the day. The revolution there threatens to consume not just France, but all of Europe. We need eyes on the ground, someone who can move through aristocratic circles while gathering intelligence, someone who speaks French fluently, someone who can decode enemy communications and build intelligence networks in hostile territory. We need both of you. The posting would begin in June after my inauguration. You would pose as wealthy American expatriates in Paris. Your mission would be to monitor the revolution, identify threats to American interests, and provide early warning of any attempts to export the violence across the Atlantic. It is dangerous work. You would be isolated, surrounded by enemies with limited support. But it is also essential work. I leave the decision to you. You have already given more than anyone should ask. With deepest respect, George Washington. Marcus set the letter down carefully. He looked at Serafina. Paris, she said softly. That's across the ocean. We'd be completely cut off. I know. It's dangerous, more dangerous than what we just did. I know. We'd have to leave everything, start over in a foreign country. I know. Marcus took her hand across the table. Which is why this isn't my decision alone. We're partners, equals. I won't go without you, and I won't ask you to go if you don't want to. Serafina looked out the window at the Hudson River flowing endlessly toward the sea. 4 months ago, she had been a desperate girl being sold like property to a man who would have destroyed her. Now she was a spy who had saved a president's life. A woman who had discovered she was brave and strong and capable of extraordinary things. A woman who had found a partner worth fighting beside. When do we leave? She asked. Marcus's answering smile was brilliant. 6 weeks, just after the inauguration. Then we'd better start preparing. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her as they stood together in the morning sunlight. Are you sure? He asked quietly. This is a different life than you imagined. I didn't imagine any of this, Serafina said. 4 months ago, I thought my life was ending, but it was just beginning. She pulled back to look at his face. You asked me once if I meant it, when I chose you over Victor, over safety. I remember. I meant it then. I mean it now. I choose you, Marcus. I choose this life. I choose the danger and the secrets and the blood on our hands. She smiled. I choose us. Partners, he asked. Always. They stood together in the dining room of Ashford Manor, planning for Paris for new missions for whatever came next. The stuttering Duke and the desperate bride were gone. In their place, two spies who had fooled the world and saved a nation. Two people who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to stand together against whatever came. The taste of champagne no longer brought memories of ash and humiliation. Now it tasted like victory, like justice, like steel and purpose, and the beginning of something extraordinary. 3 months later, on a mild evening in June, Serafina and Marcus stood on the deck of a ship bound for France. The American coastline was disappearing behind them, growing smaller with each passing moment. Nervous, Marcus asked, his arm around her waist. Terrified, Serafina admitted, and exhilarated. Good. That means you're paying attention. She laughed and leaned into him. Below decks, their trunks were packed with everything they would need for their new identity. Expensive clothes, false documents, invisible ink, coded books, weapons hidden in clever compartments. But the most important thing they carried was each other. Tell me again, she said. Who are we this time? Mr. and Mrs. Jonathan Pierce, wealthy Americans interested in French wine and culture. Harmless, foolish, utterly unthreatening. Harmless? Serafina repeated with a smile. They never see us coming, do they? Never. The sun set over the Atlantic, turning the water to gold and crimson. Somewhere ahead in the chaos of revolutionary France, new dangers waited. New enemies. New missions. But Serafina Ashford was not afraid. She had knelt in broken glass and chosen kindness over gold. She had decoded conspiracies and stopped assassinations. She had found her strength in darkness and her purpose in service. And she had found a love worth fighting for. Whatever came next, they would face it the same way they had faced everything. Together. Partners. Equals.